Welcome to the Sylum Rants podcast. Today is Monday, July 13th. I'm having an okay day. I'm hoping you're having an okay day too. It is I'm a bit tired and sluggish today. A little moving a bit slow, I guess. A little to myself. This weekend I was a little to myself, I didn't really want to we can't do much because of the pandemic. That's probably what's getting to me. It's the pandemic. Um, Having to stay home a lot and being in my thoughts. And if anybody knows me, I go very deep into my thoughts. I am very introspective and a harsh critic. So, me being to myself can be a little. No, it's not the. Sometimes it is the best thing for me because I can create good ideas and I attempt to be very open and very. Not very, but I'm pretty creative. I'm not sure if you guys have seen, but I put art on my Instagram before on my story because I like to do art because I tend to be um, very, like I said, introspective, and I like to just kind of be artistic and express the way I see things. I don't know if that makes sense, but kind of ranting right now. Okay, so sorry about that. That was like a minute that you guys didn't need to have. Now let's talk about this weekend's. Wow, I sound exciting, right? I sound super exciting. Yeah, so let's get to this weekend's fights. And geez, man, this weekend's fights were the long. I think they were. It was the longest event. It felt like it. It didn't end until pretty much 2 in the morning here, and I fall asleep considerably earlier. I've forced myself to be an early bird person, so that wasn't very easy. Being a fight fan, if you're an early bird person, if you like to wake up early, it's hard to be a fight fan because you know that on Saturdays when there's a fight, you're sleeping a lot later and you're still going to wake up the same time because if you wake up early every day, your body naturally wakes up earlier. So I I struggle with that on fight nights. I don't like to sleep so late, but watching the fights is to me the most important thing, so I push through. Yeah, so I I was very entertained by this weekend's fights and not by the main event, obviously. Um, in the sense that it is kind of the same thing over and over again. Jorge Masvidal didn't come in. He seemed he seemed almost dismissive in the beginning when he got to the cage, way more dismissive than usual. He really took his time to get into fighting mode. I think he was conserving his energy the entire time. And I think by him trying to relax, like over relax in the beginning and not be nervous, I think that was him trying to lower his heart rate and keep his cardio, to reserve cardio. Because if you hype yourself up and you don't have the cardio, if you go into the fight amped, you can lose a lot of energy that you would have that you could use in fights. Fedor was really big on this. He wouldn't do stare downs. John Jones, I believe, kind of does this too, but Fedor wouldn't do stare downs right before his fight because he believed that it took away energy. It took away some of his cardio, I guess, or just would amp him up too much. So that is one way to approach a fight, and that's what Jorge tried doing for this fight. It was smart as a veteran move, but at the same time, then he came out and tried to knock out Usman in the first minute. Um, he didn't seem to really have a crazy game plan coming in. He seemed like he just wanted to knock him out and stop the wrestling, which obviously that's supposed to be his game plan, but it didn't seem very calculated. Um, so when Usman took down Jorge, um, in the first minute, Jorge threw like a leg kick, and then I think it was the first minute. I can be talking shit. I'm pretty sure it's the first minute. Jorge went for a kick. Usman caught the kick and took him down. At that moment, when Jorge got hit when Jorge got taken to the ground and was in full guard, you saw right away a few things. And actually, this was gonna lead me to the general discussion of today's podcast, and I'll get into it. Jorge, when he got taken down, he already seemed tired. His cardio was already, it didn't look great, and that's one thing I want to get into. Also, was he didn't seem very prepared, which I found weird because if you know during these times things are so uncertain, and there's a possibility that you could be fighting for the title, and again, anything could have happened, and he knew he was next in line. It was between him and Colby, and that's pretty much it, right? Maybe Leon Edwards, but he knew that he's a more popular fighter, and he would have been called first than anybody else. He didn't seem to have took it seriously because his weight cut was supposedly a pretty bad one. He cut a lot of weight, which he's fighting at welterweight now, and the reason why he went up to welterweight was to avoid weight cuts. I don't think that did any good to mental his mental fortitude during the fight because he if you go up in weight to avoid a weight cut, that means the weight cut sorry, that means the weight cut you felt like was doing something to you mentally and physically. So the fact that he had to cut a lot of weight probably didn't help him mentally and feel great physically. And he didn't supposedly he was training, but it didn't seem like he was training enough with how tired he got. And I think as a fighter and somebody that could easily have been a replacement for this fight, he should have been way more prepared. His weight should have been a little lower, and he should have had the better cardio. It's easier said than done for me to say it, right? I don't make the money that he makes. I don't live the life that he does. But I think he should have been responsible. And again, I heard he was training, but was it to the point where it wasn't enough? At the end, it wasn't enough. Yeah, so what I was going to get to was Jorge Masvidal, when he got taken down, he the first reaction was elbows, 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 which is cool. That's what a lot of people are doing. Tony Ferguson kind of brought that back in, and Anderson Silva used to do that back in the day. But elbows from the ground seemed like a good idea, and it punishes the guy from the bottom. I mean, the guy that's on top from you being on the bottom. And besides that, he didn't seem to have much of a system from closed guard. And someone that's been in the game for so long, you would think they would have a system developed in closed guard, just like how he has a system, just Jesus Christ, just like how he has a system from having a takedown defense from the cage. He should also have a system from closed guard. Easier said than done, again, but he was still pretty fresh in the beginning. Whether he was a bit tired or not, he easily could have brought in some muscle memory from his training and applied the system that he has from close guard. I just didn't see that. I saw someone that doesn't seem to play a lot of close guard. Someone doesn't seem to have a way to really deal with close guard unless maybe it's kicking off the hips and getting up, which isn't always an answer. And if it is your answer, well, you should have several options to get there, not just push down on the head and hope that pull down the head and hope that the referee stops it. And that's what it looked like he was doing. He didn't seem to have much of a system. And I'm going to talk about systems a lot this podcast, and this tends to be a thing that I do for these fight breakdowns. Is not only am I breaking down the fights, but through the fights we can go through narratives and concepts. And I believe an important thing to have when you're a fighter are systems. You should be systems based because you can't just have a random set of moves that are disconnected and be successful, because your game has to be mapped and systematized. It has to be woven in and ready to be applied at any moment and at the time that it should be applied. It should be drilled in and in your muscle memory and in your DNA. That's what you do as a coach, and that's what you do to help develop your students and your fighters. We're going to talk a bit about the lack of systematizing, especially we're going to talk about it from from mainly the not only the guard, but we're going to talk about it from just from the ground in general, because even though the most common person can see striking, for me, at least, what I've noticed is that it's easier to see systems from the ground because when you're on the ground, movements are they tend to be a lot bigger and slower and easily to notice. So even though most people don't that watch MMA don't have a let's say a jiu-jitsu background or wrestling background, it's much easier to see what someone's doing on the ground over and over again compared to striking. It must just be my bias, but I've noticed that because in striking things happen very very fast and it's hard to see people's tendencies as in where their head is when they're striking, where their feet are, what exact techniques are they using because things are faster when standing and on the ground they're bigger movements and you can see them. So we're going to get more into systems in a bit. One thing Jorge, not only did he lack a system on the ground, which to me was very, very obvious from close guard, he had not much of a system at all, but maybe it was the lack of being able to use a system from standing, but he kind of did the same like shuffle step over and over again, and he didn't seem to have any good feints this fight, and he didn't seem to circle away from the cage. If anything, he kept backing up from the cage and would just stay there. Now, when you're tired, it's hard to think on your feet and to circle out and to really, again, use your feints and pump out your jab to circle away, kind of like what Rose does. He didn't seem to do that. He just seemed to fight in very small bursts and just recover the rest of the fight. It sucks. His cardio didn't hold up, but on the flip side, Usman, his cardio also didn't seem that great. Usman also seemed tired pretty fast. I wonder if it had to do with being in Abu Dhabi. I don't know, but it can be something of that sort. He reminded me of a lot of Randy Couture in this fight. Randy Couture would just put people against the cage and beat up on them like how he did with Jorge. If you guys remember, Randy Couture wasn't the most exciting fighter, and that was kind of his game plan. He was a hard-nosed wrestler, and he would just hold you up against the cage, put his head underneath your chin, and just beat up on you, and do a lot of a lot of dirty boxing, a lot of single collar ties and uppercuts and whatnot. So that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me a lot of that. It reminded me a lot of Kane versus Dos Santos, except for less damage. And yeah, so that was Jorge and Usman. Um, for Max and Alexander Volkanovski, Max seemed to have adapted pretty well from the first fight. He had the same defense as he normally does, which he puts his rear hand up and his lead hand down as a defense, and it seems to be almost a bad habit. Dustin Poirier capitalized on this, and that's one way Alexander Volkanovski, that's one of the ways he capitalized in the last fight. If you want more information on that, you can listen to the pre-fight analyst or the pre-fight whatever thing. My last podcast, okay? My last podcast. Just watch my last podcast. Um, yeah, he Max adopted Max adapted well, not adopted, but adapted well with kicks, and just the kicks were a big change in the fight, a big change in dynamic because he kept Volkanovski at bay. It was hard for Alexander to come in with the step in hook or the step in cross, like I was explaining in the last podcast. He made it harder for him to attack his rear leg and just attack his leg in general, even though he did still. And yeah, I think some people are calling this a robbery. I can kind of see why because dropped uh Max dropped Alexander Volkanovski in about the first or second round, I believe, with a head kick. So I can see how that can sway into a robbery, but I saw it as Max winning 1, 2, and then Alexander Volkanovski winning 4 and 5. And then I think the third round is iffy. and it could have gone either way. I was actually kind of leaning Alexander, but I can totally see how Max. You think Max got it? I don't think it was a crazy robbery, but I can totally see how you're swayed one way or the other. Volkanovski just kind of played the same game plan again. He did adapt midway and he started fighting inside more. His feints weren't as good as the first fight, in my opinion, but it's also because Max Holloway was giving him different looks. And Alexander did well by getting in close and going for takedowns and trying to go for takedowns. At the end, it must be haunting Max at the end when Volkanovski got close to Max and they were clinching, and Max went for his own takedown and then ended up in side control. And yeah, that must, well, no, he ended up in half guard, but still, that must be haunting Max right now. He must have thought, I'm an idiot. I should have just kept it standing. Even if he had double underhooks on me or an underhook on me and I was leaning against the cage, it's better that than him taking me down and ground and pounding me a little bit at the end of the fight. So that Alexander looks better by the end of the fight. And at least an impression on Alexander Volkanovski. Sucks, but as being a fighter, sometimes you gamble for that win. You gamble for that you stay conservative or you go for that definite win in that round. And he seemed to go for that definite win. He gambled and he lost the gamble there. So yeah, I didn't think it was a crazy robbery, but I can see how it was seen on both sides. Now going to Peter Yan and Jose Aldo. Peter Yan reminds me of Dan Hooker in the sense that he doesn't have the greatest head movement and level changing. He just kind of stays with his head in the center line. He doesn't have great pivoting or amazing footwork. He has a great jab, and he was jabbing Jose Aldo up the entire fight. His hands are so fast, especially his jab, and yeah, his hands were way faster than Jose Aldo. And Jose Aldo had flashes of his great leg kicks. It was cool to see him flash his old self. He went very Thai at one point and was doing the grunting and everything. It's pretty entertaining to see MMA fighters mimic what they think a Thai fighter is, and it can be really weird at times. I remember Efren Escudero did it back in the day, fighting like a comic book style Muay Thai fighter, and then the second he actually went in range, he did nothing of the sort. It just looked like a mess. That's not how Jose Aldo does it, but he kind of almost. There's a YouTuber out there that he also does this. I'm not gonna say his name, but he has a really cool style. But then when he fights a quote unquote Thai style, or he's in Thailand, or he's sparring quote unquote Muay Thai, he does this very traditional punching that Thai fighters do, which their elbows flare out, and they just grunt, and they don't have terrible hands, and they don't have good distance management. And he kind of does that, and I've seen him do it and get his ass whooped, and it just baffles me that people do that in MMA. They have this obsession with pretending to be a Thai fighter at times, but what they think it is. It's weird. It's very weird. It's somewhat like a caricature or a stereotype of a Muay Thai fighter. It's weird. Um, yeah, and just like Masvidal, Jose Aldo didn't seem to have a system on the ground either. When he tends to be stacked from open guard, he just gets beat up from there. The same thing that happened with Max Holloway. He just stays stacked there. I'm not saying that it's an easy situation to counter, especially when you've gone rocked and you're on the ground and you're dizzy and you're tired. I'm not saying you should be Ryan Hall or Damian Maia level jiu-jitsu when you're on the ground, but there should be an attempt of some sort of system, some sort of muscle memory. And you saw none from Jose, and you didn't see any from Jorge. The best reaction Jose had from that situation, which I think Taquinho, the Brazilian world champion, not Palhares, but the other guy, I forgot his name, but whatever. He did the same thing when they're in that open guard situation, that gray area. what Jose Aldo did this, and he did this also, was they would grab the gloves almost like if it was the gi. They would use it like spider guard or open guard with the shins, and they would grab the gi. It was kind of like that, but using the gloves. And it kind of begs the old question of gi versus no gi, and should you train gi versus no gi if you're going to fight MMA. And there's an argument to be had about this because when you see a reaction like that, someone grabbing sleeves instead of, let's say, going to K guard, like what a lot of modern guys are doing in the no gi game, they're going to K guard when they're in that open guard. They just spiral. Instead, they went into a more gi oriented attack, which is grabbing the gloves like if it was spider guard or something. And that's not a good reaction. First of all, it's illegal because you can't grab the gloves, and it's not strong enough. You're still right in front of the person, and wrist control from that situation will not help you. So, yeah, that's something that to think about. And I'm not saying not to train gi, but you need to train in spots. You need to train it in situations, and you have to be honest with how you train your jiu-jitsu. And I think some people think that training jiu-jitsu in general is created equal, and it is not. If you train a game that is very, let's say, lapel guard oriented, very spider guard oriented, or very berimbolo oriented, not saying you can't do any of these at any point or learn them, but if it's heavily, heavily, heavily emphasized into this, and you don't have any other game ingrained in you, like maybe a tight half guard or coming up for a single leg, or maybe a good close guard game, if you don't have any of this, well, you know, not all jiu-jitsu is created equally, and they're not all the same purpose. So, yeah, and wrestling's the same way too. Some people are really reliant on the shoe control and shoelace control in wrestling, and when they fight MMA, you can totally tell that it's not, they don't have a game that is suitable for MMA. Now to the Rose and Andrade fight. Rose did a great job sticking behind her jab and having a great ring craft, like always. Andrade had this head movement that was Andrade's head movement. What reminded me of is an example of more isn't better, right? Just because you do it more doesn't mean it's better. You want to use any tool in spots and in situations, and knowing when to use it. So knowing a tool, using a tool doesn't mean using it all the time. It doesn't mean spamming it until it works. It is knowing when to use it and timing it. It's pretty common sense. That's how everything is in life, right? It's not just one, like you do something over and over again until it works. You use that tool and when it's needed, and you have several tools, and you use them when it comes up. You don't use a butcher's knife to cut paper unless obviously if that's all you have, but you try to use scissors. There's a time when to use the scissors and there's a time when to use a knife. That's a terrible analogy, but you get what I mean. Rose faded a bit at the end. She kind of lost her mobility, right? Like her feet wasn't moving as well, her head wasn't moving as well. She kind of stayed in the pocket, willing to exchange more. Because of that, she also got taken down. So she she faded a bit mentally at the end and physically. I don't know what that means because it was only a 3 round fight compared to a 5 round fight, and I wonder if she's gonna fade for a 5 round fight in the future. But I guess we'll see in time. Now let's get back to the idea of systems, right? And that's kind of like what I'm gonna what I'm revolving this podcast around is understanding systems and why they're important. We talked about how it's important to have a system that caters to you and situations, kind of like the Jose Aldo situation, where you should have the correct systems in place. And to me, seeing Jose and seeing Jorge is kind of an indication of you should you should pressure test your situation, your systems. They shouldn't be just used on a whim or not ingrained for the fight. They have to be ready and used at all times. And to see someone's system in a fight and I said this, is actually easier to see it on the ground because they're bigger movements, but you also see it, this is a big way to see it. If someone's stuck in a situation over and over and over again, especially if they get finished from there over and over again, then you know that they're lacking something there. And I guess they're blind to it, or they're being stubborn about it, or their coach isn't good at helping them develop a system from that position. So Jose's Jose's being finished the same way twice, right? Actually, I think it was three times, right? Um, him being, or at least having major trouble in that situation more than once in his career, especially as long as he's been fighting, it shows that his coach hasn't helped him develop his flaws in that system, in that situation in general. And that's a problem. And as a coach, you should be seeing that. You should be seeing where are the areas that your fighters are lacking. Same thing with Jorge. He should have had some sort of inkling of how to. There should be an automatic reaction on the ground in certain positions, like right away. Like you get your frames in inside control, or maybe you're looking for your underhook. Maybe from close guard you're getting an overhook. Maybe from open guard you're really big on getting De La Hiva in a way, but there was none of that. And I think it had to do with them not just ingraining that muscle memory in properly. Another way you can see it is by seeing repetitive movements. So if someone's repeatedly maybe getting wrist control on an overhook, or maybe you see them bringing their hips up for like a hip bump or something, or maybe getting an underhook over and over again, you know that, well, that's their system right there. Maybe trying to get to dogfight, and just because it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not their system, or maybe it's not a, it doesn't mean it's not a good system. It could be the other fighter just has a better one, or maybe the other fighter has developed his defense at a higher level. But at the same time, when you see someone react right away to something, well, that's their DNA. That's their system. The DNA of their system being expressed through their movements. And that's really important to see. And if you want to analyze fights, you should categorize systems, and you should develop, not only you should train first of all and develop systems. It's going to help you see fighters, develop them and use them. But if you're just a fan, you're watching, you should really, really write down fighters' systems and their habits and kind of map them together. And then you'll be able to piece things together. And that's going to help you see that fighters aren't really styles fighting each other, it's systems fighting each other. And then you'll know which systems do good against other systems, and how do these systems crumble and how do they develop. And that's one way to look at fights. So all in all, those great fights. For me, again, it almost ended at 2, so I was exhausted. But I'm glad we got some good fights. It was exciting, and yeah. So that was today's podcast. It's about 28 minutes in. So there's gonna be a final section of the podcast, and this is for the listeners slash viewers. If you're looking at my logo the entire time, for whatever that means, because I still haven't really made a logo. Let's have a real talk here. I'm very doubtful about this podcast, and the rebranding thing was hard for me. I'm over it, right? I already changed everything, and we just move forward. I'm actually happy now because, like I said, I'm not bounded to a name. But at the same time, I have doubts because I'm not getting a lot of feedback. I'm not getting a lot of, I don't know. I just feel doubtful at times, and days like today, when I don't feel as well, I feel like maybe I should quit. But hey, we gotta keep trucking, right? We gotta keep grinding. It takes a lot of me to do these, and I don't want to sound like a victim or sound like I'm being dramatic, but it just is what it is, right? Like how Max Holloway would say, it is what it is. And yeah, so I'm just grateful for whoever has been listening until this point. And if you have listened to this point, please put a thumbs up in the comment section, right? That would be our little, like, hey, I made it through and I listened to you. and that would mean the world to me. It'll also help me see, compared to the ratio of people liking and putting little emojis, I want to know how much people are truly listening up to 30 minutes. Is someone actually listening 30 minutes in? And if you are, put a thumbs up. And I really, really appreciate you, because this is what I do it for the people that have made it this far. Not only to help me grow as a person and martial artist, but to have a conversation and meet other people and hopefully help other people later on in the future. So yeah, if you made it this far, put a thumbs up. I greatly appreciate it. And if you guys want to ask me some questions, I'm willing to answer them. I'm going to make another podcast later on this week. And if I can get some good questions, I'll make it pretty much just a Q&A type thing and answer a bunch of questions. If you want to be a guest on this podcast, let me know, and I am down to have a podcast down to have a guest on here. I would love to have guests and to have cool discussions and a cool hang. That would be nice. And yeah, so have a great week. Have a great Monday. I'll be back most likely around Thursday, around there, maybe Friday. Unless I have a spontaneous podcast because I have a great, reason to do it, or a great idea. Maybe if I had a guest or some good questions, I would do it. So yeah, if you can leave a thumb up emoji, I would know you made it this far. And you can even say, hey, thumbs up. I made it to the ends. And yeah, so I appreciate you guys. Have a great week. And if you can, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're on Instagram, just please like it and just give me some feedback. Have a great week, guys. Have a great Monday, and keep grinding. And thank you. I really, really thank you.